came back out here on March 3rd to get a view of this balcony during the daytime. Again, really nice view. The sun might be whiting out some of the fog in the distance. And over here we have a very expansive view of the Mediterranean Sea. A couple vessels way off in the distance. What else we have down here? Looks like there's some construction going on. Kids' playground. Here's a look inside tonight's hotel room. I'm just back in my room right now. It's pretty small. Place is a lot more dumpy looking than what we had previously. I'm just gonna do a brief walk around. Still like these slick floors, but it smells. It's a little dingy. There's not a noticeable view outside from what I can see. So but anyway, today was a pretty interesting day. So we got up about 7 a.m., went down to the hotel lobby area, had breakfast. Then we packed together all our things, and I don't remember the name of the place we went to. I actually have it in a video, so I might just cut to that. So here we are in Bahram. We're at an old synagogue, and I believe we're near a Syrian Catholic church. We'll be hearing a speaker give a presentation. Somewhere off in that distance, I don't have a good shot, I believe is Lebanon. There's not a border crossing from Israel into Lebanon because they're not allowed to travel. Again, this is some sort of an ancient synagogue, and we're walking around in the ruins of it. So I was able to get some more information on these areas. So this all in here is Israeli still, and where that tower is located is actually, you might not even be able to see it on the shot, is the border between Israel and Lebanon. If you look over here, between these two trees. That is Lebanon.
Hello, kids.
I'm going to try to get some better shots of Lebanon as we move on. After we were done there, we went to some other place that started with a J. I feel terrible that I don't remember these things, but we went to so many places today. It's like Jisha, something like that, and briefly had lunch. Then we traveled for about an hour or two up to the Golan Heights. Golan Heights is a pretty interesting spot because it's just on the border of Syria, and we were able to look into Syria. But while we were in visiting the Catholic Church, we were overlooking Lebanon. Now, with Lebanon, there's not a marking at the border because Israelis aren't allowed to travel into Lebanon, so there's no checkpoint. But overlooking the Golan Heights, you sort of do have a checkpoint, or at least an old one that was a base set up by the UN, but it was deemed too dangerous to keep there, so the UN got rid of it, and they haven't set up a new base. But we were at the Golan Heights overlooking Syria, learning about the conflicts in the local area, and then see, what did we do after? So the Golan Heights were a little cold, and you had to pay to use the bathroom there. It was just a unisex bathroom, so you had multiple stalls that were all closed off, but men and women went in the same place. And so you paid the price was 2 shekels, so shekels convert to US dollars in about a 1-to-3 ratio, so it takes 3 shekels to make $1 about. Then, see, after we visited, before we visited the Golan Heights, actually, we also stopped at Caesarea Philippi, which was a location in the Gospel of Matthew where Jesus asked Peter and maybe John, I don't remember who, claimed who the people thought that Jesus was, and that Jesus there privately to his disciples claims his divinity as the Christ. And Jesus says to Peter, "Upon this rock I will build my church." And so we stood in that general area, that location. Apparently the cave up here had a lot of significance in the area. We actually have to go, so I'm not going to film this for too long. But this cave had a lot of idol worshippers there and such. And this is the location where Jesus told the Apostle Peter that upon this rock he would build his church. So again, this is in Caesarea Philippi. And the buildings up there at the top are pretty interesting too, because they are worship places for the Druze, which we don't know much about. So we have the Doric, I don't know what that is, this is Doric capital, and then over here is Corinthian capital. And that's Corinthian capital and Doric capital. None of these other pillars are labeled. We have sections of pipe for high pressure something. Again, I'm running low on time. I better get back to the bus. But I thought it was interesting. There's the Doric and the Corinthian here in Caesarea Philippi. See, other than that, we went to a very interesting talk tonight by Dr. Shapiro. Can't remember the woman's first name, but she held strong views that relate to corporate responsibility of nations. And so, although it wasn't as strongly stated as I had anticipated, I think that she feels that the Christians are corporately responsible for what happened to the Jews in the Holocaust, and because of the fact that they didn't act sooner to somehow bomb the concentration camps. And so it's very interesting because the idea of corporate responsibility is not something that I originally thought or really believed in prior to this trip, but just from some brief conversations today, I think that there's a very compelling case for corporate responsibility, at least from God's perspective. And so the first thing that we notice about corporate responsibility is that it does occur in the Bible. So maybe it would be best to back up and define what we mean by this. So corporate responsibility is the idea that you are a part of a larger group, right? So you're part of a nation, you're a part of a religious group, maybe. You're a part of some sort of a culture. So, for example, I would be in the groups, like I'd be in a group of white people, I'd be in a group of Christians, I'm in a group of Americans. I belong to all these groups. And so, with that in mind, I have undoubtedly benefited from the enslavement of black people. If you look back through history, well, actually, I'm probably not in my case, actually, because my German ancestors didn't come over until much later. But I'm sure that there is some sort of group of people that my ancestors have marginalized, or there's some sort of, devastating grave sins or consequences that they've committed. I would have to maybe think of a different group that I belong to. So I think Christians used to persecute a lot of different sects of people at one point in time. So as a Christian, I would be corporately responsible for the wrongful persecutions that Christians in the past have made. And so at first thought, you might think, well, why in the world would you be responsible for that? You weren't alive. You didn't have anything to do with that. That was beyond your control. But we do see throughout Scripture that God will punish future generations for the sins of past generations. Another thing to consider is that I am reaping probably benefits in some way, right? So I have ancestors that have sinned, and they sinned because it benefited them somehow, and I'm probably reaping those benefits by being a white Christian American in some way. And so if I'm going to reap the benefits of those past actions, then it only follows suit that I would also be responsible for the negative implications of the sin that's associated with that. Now, the flip side of corporate responsibility, though, is that I haven't got to dig in too much today, but that is pretty important, would be corporate forgiveness, right? So just because black people were marginalized at one point in time, or Jews were marginalized, putting it lightly, in the Holocaust, or whatever, there comes a time where those nations have to forgive. So the Jews have to forgive the Germans corporately as a group. The Germans have to the whites, I'm all messed up, the blacks have to forgive the whites as a group. The Native Americans have to forgive the European colonizers that came over during that time period. But a few concerns that comes up with corporate responsibility is you don't always know what you're corporately responsible for. And so I think maybe you're under an obligation to exercise some due diligence in trying to figure that out. The other thing is you might be culturally responsible for the marginalization of many different groups. And if that's the case, you then have to pick and choose between which marginalized groups are you going to support and which ones are you not. It might not be possible for you to support all these marginalized groups. So there's a lot of things to chew on there. But if you agree that God instituted principles of corporate responsibility in the past, then you would likely agree that he still does it today. But these are just some thoughts that are weighing on my mind. So it seems that the question kind of in the air is, have Christians as a group done enough to support the Israelis since their persecution in the Holocaust? Have they as a collective whole done enough? I don't really know if there's a clear answer to that or not. But anyway, so that's kind of a recap of the trip today, and hopefully I can include some good clips and footage and things that you'll all like to see. I don't think that I really have a whole lot else to comment on, so just gonna head out. See you soon.